I desperately just want to play the cartoon intro, but I'm not sure if I get in trouble for that. So I'll just play the speaking parts and break it up.
In the 26th century.
26th century? They might have changed that from the comic. I'd have to do the math.
Mankind faces an epic struggle for survival. The forces of nature have spun wildly out of control. Mighty cities have crumbled, and the dinosaurs have returned to reclaim the Earth.
Yes, sir!
In this savage land, one man stands alone.
Except for all these other characters we're showing.
Jack Tenrek, defending humanity in a world gone mad. A world where only the strong survive. A world of Cadillacs and dinosaurs.
Quahoon! It's Jurassic June! Welcome back! That's an intro that could explain this stuff better than I could. Apparently this is the month that we celebrate all things Jurassic Park. To that end, we're ignoring Jurassic Park entirely and instead focusing on that 80s, 90s comic, other comic, toy line, cartoon show, video game, other video game property that doesn't get nearly enough attention to force Mark Schultz to finish the story. XENOZOIC Tales, or as it's better known, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, was a comic series started in 1986, has been reprinted a few times, and has no ending! Oh, the lengths I go for you guys. I thought I could get out of this one easy by doing a random issue of Cadillacs and Dinosaurs that I found in the dollar boxes at the comic shop. Thinking I was pretty clever, I read the 4 issues I found and realized it's been so long since I'd read the whole series that I didn't have a clear perspective on it anymore. So I read this entire beast again. I figured it'd be easier to start with the first few stories because that seemed like what the first issue most likely would have contained. Printed by Flesk. This book collects all the comics but excludes backup stories that Mark wrote but might not have drawn, like Dog's Life and Aqueduct.
This is a gala day for you.
Well, a gala day is enough for me. I don't think I can handle anymore.
Aqueduct me off though because it's actually mentioned in one of the last stories of XENOZOIC. Mustafa Cairo blows it up when he learns oh god, her name. Scharnhorst? Scharnhorst. We'll go with Scharnhorst. Is using it for her own personal means. I'm getting ahead of myself. Steve Stiles did some of these, and I wonder if it's a residuals type of problem. They need to get these together and finally do a massive XENOZOIC omnibus. Anyway, our main players for these stories are Jack Cadillac Tenrek, an old blood mechanic and kind of a shaman to his tribe of people that live in the city in the sea, and Hannah Dundee, an ambassador from the Wassoon tribe that lives in the south, who secretly won access to the massive library they have in an underground vault. Jack's entire life is centered around restoring old Cadillacs, able to run on dino guano. Man, I love this image. I'd love to have this framed. And keeping the balance with the planet by preserving the Machinatio Vitae. Anyone want to take a guess on how to spell that? Go ahead, I'll wait. Thanks for playing, though. They don't even give it this name until the last few comics. The rest of the time they just refer to it as keeping the balance. Anywho, along with his side allies, like the engineer Mustafa Cairo, Jack acts kind of like the moral compass of his tribe and despises poachers, like Hammer Terhune and his brothers. These names are difficult to say when you haven't said them out loud. He's constantly facing off with a council of governors that are sick of his guilt trips and basically want to expand without restrictions, which forces Jack to try to keep humanity from making all the same mistakes it made previously, which led to the great cataclysm that forced them underground 500 years ago. If you're an environmentalist at heart, on some level this series is probably going to hit you right in the Captain Planet. Buh, Captain Planet. But enough, let's get into it. Quahoon! So we're looking at the first 3 short stories in this book because that's more or less how they broke it up in the comic series when Epic Comics reprinted it from the kitchen sink press versions, which I just found out was a banner that Marvel used to print them. Huh. First up, an Archipelago of Stone. Did I say that right? Ah! Immediately, it's the 30th century. I knew something was off. There's narration as the reader flies towards the coast of irregular shapes, which as they get closer turn into cliffs and canyons, which then turn into an Archipelago of Stone. Flying any closer and you'd be able to see the human inhabitants. A gunshot rings out and the reader sees we're actually watching from the point of view of a pteranodon. Stay away, you thieving vermin, before I blow a hole clean through ya! Still enough stand to watch without having to deal with your bathroom habits. Bull. Suddenly, our lookout spots a Wassoon ship on the horizon. Word spreads fast throughout the city. Those are the governors, by the way. Even into the seedier corners. Here we find Wrench Terhune, a no-good, dirty, murderous poacher. Is murderous redundant when referring to poachers? If Batman has taught me anything, it's that criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot. Wrench Terhune assumes that the Wassoon are coming for them. Since that time, they were caught poaching by a Wassoon group that they eventually murdered in their sleep. Wrench and his men start formalizing a plan to make sure no Wassoon Stone ever put into port. This blobby mass is Hammer Terhune, by the way, who shows up in a later story. They're brothers.
Pass this on to the Cadillac.
But Jack's got friends everywhere in the city and the sea. They really should name this place something easier to say. I don't know, something like Tampa, or, I don't know, Detroit, something. An ally takes a boat out to warn Jack, Cadillac, Tenrec. That's Jack's garage, by the way. By the end of the series, it'll look like he lives on freaking Barsoom or Mongo. It's ridiculous. Jack's buddy!
I can't remember his name, and I don't think they ever said it.
Surprises him and spills the information. Jack asks why they didn't just go to the governing council, and the reply is they would have just sent him to find Jack anyway, so he was just saving time. He tells the guy to get some men together to find Hermes and get him as backup. He tells his buddies to hold the fort, and off they go. Woof. Mark definitely improved in his renderings of Jack and Hannah over the years.
Especially Jack.
Jack measures the situation and quickly comes up with a plan, telling his men to spread out into the crowd and find Terhune's cronies, and heads up into the highest scraper, looking for the man himself. Before splitting up, he reiterates that if Hermes shows up before it's too late, to send him up to help. As the Wassoon pull into the pier, there's a series of panels showing Jack's men quietly taking out the riffraff, and Jack getting into position high up in the tower. Also, first appearance of Hannah Dundee. She's greeted by the governors as the last stooges are taken down. Jack sees a rifle pointing out a window and smashes his way into the room. Quahoon! Terhune gets the drop on Cadillac, but Jack's a clever one, as he snaps the window blind open in the dim room, momentarily blinding the poacher. He fires several blind shots, wounding Jack when suddenly from the hallway, God, his freaking spine is dangling out! For some reason, I'm having flashes of Eddie Carr from The Lost World now. Aw, poor Eddie. Surprise! Hermes is a cutter, Allosaurus. If you look at some of the other media, they say that Jack found him and raised him from a pup when his mother was killed by poachers. He's like Jack's pet guard dog. I believe he has more of a role in the cartoon as something like a vicious Scrappy-Doo. Mark never uses him again, at least in this beast of a collection. Jack looks like he's been bandaged up and heads down to meet the Wassoon and give her a piece of his mind for coming in unannounced and disrupting his business. His men struggle to get Hermes under control in the background. Hannah throws some crap back at him because she's no pushover, and the governor leads her away to discuss business as the two of them exchange sharp looks. That's really what Jack and Hannah's relationship seems to be, giving each other shit and then out of the blue sneaking off into a tent together, or sneaking off to some secluded room in a Wassoon palace to throw down. But those are later issues. There's a really great one-page story at the beginning of this book that basically has Jack staring at a sunset and Hannah saying, "Penny for your thoughts?" And it just immediately devolves into a nonsense argument before they end up leaving together to go do something. It's amusing, you should go read it. The Opportunists. The second story in the book starts with one of my most favorite and hated things in the world. A sea monster. Not a fan of things with lots of teeth that can swim better than me. Hannah is hanging out with one of the governors still when an alarm goes out. It's your basic shark alarm for mosasaurs, telling the fishing boats out at sea to beat it back to the reefs pronto. The call goes out too late though. A 3-hour tour indeed. Governor Knock expresses his frustration at losing brave men because they have no way of warning them in time about the Threshers. Oh, by the way, XENOZOIC is set so far in the future that they have their own naming convention for some things. Briefly, Cutters are Allosaurus, Thresher, Mosasaurus, Slither, crawling lizardy types, Shivat, T-Rex, Overlander, Truck, Sailback, Dimetrodon, Zeeks, Pteranodon. And I forget what they call the Stegosaurus, but I call them Bestosaurus. Back to it. So Governor Knock goes off to govern, and Hannah comes across this weirdo Dave dreaming about flying. He introduces himself as Renfro and tells her all about how he loves Zeeks and how he's sort of an expert on their flight patterns. Boom! He tells her a sad story about never having left the city and how Zeeks can go anywhere they want, and Hannah springs into action. She's an impetuous character sometimes, taking action when maybe she shouldn't. So she tells Renfro that he and her are going to lure some Zeeks back to the city so he can have his own nest, despite the fact that most people see the scavengers as bad luck. The next day they set sail and find the colony. Their plan works and they lead the creatures back to shore. Suddenly they scatter. A shark bursts from the water, attacking their boat, and Hannah beats the beast in the face with an oar.
Smile, you son of a...
Hannah explains that Zeeks are opportunists, but are also cautious. They resume their trip back with the pterosaurs in tow. At the north end of the city, Renfro climbs a building to their secret stash of stinky fish and starts chucking them out the window. The following morning, their plan has worked. The Zeeks have moved in, and Governor Knock is not pleased as it seems the creatures are harassing their fishing boats now. Without warning, the Zeeks scatter into the sky, and Hannah yells for them to sound the alarm. Quick! The Thresher bursts from the surface of the water, but too late, Hot Plate. The boats are safe on the reef once again. People rush to the rooftop, and Hannah starts laying it on about Governor Knox's brilliant plan to use the Zeeks as a new warning system. So the title ends up being pretty clever, named as both the Mosasaur and Hannah were opportunists in their actions. I'm sure she's hoping to gain favor through this act to help promote the true reason she came to the city in the sea. Bum, bum, bum. Our final story is called Law of the Land. It starts as a couple of overlanders are getting prepped for their journey when Jack calls everyone over to him to give them the lowdown. The law of the land, as it were. Jack and his crew have been contracted to take these guys out to the Calhoun copper mines for work. And Hannah, for some reason. He gives the one guy crap for his choice of protection and warns them that poaching basically won't be tolerated. That's rude. What could possibly make Jack think that this guy's a poacher? I think he's just prejudiced against leopard print. That's a wonderful shot as they travel, and after some time, Jack signals to pull over and make camp. Meanwhile, old leopard print sneaks off and takes aim at an animal that I can't for the life of me think of the name of. Jack catches up to him to reiterate his rules, and his friends talk about him behind his back. Not in the mean way, but in the story exposition kind of way. Our intrepid travelers travel further into the interior when someone asks where leopard print is. No! Suddenly, gunfire in the distance. Jack punts the knife out of his hand. He is pissed. Telling Clough, C-L-O-U-G-H, that this is his last warning. Hannah is still questioning what's up with how Jack behaves, and Kurgo says that there's going to be hell to pay. Many miles later at the next camp, Hannah overhears Jack looking for Clough and decides to follow him and witnesses Jack tampering with the rifles. The next day, Hannah bolts awake to the sound of gunfire and screaming and springs into action, while the others are less enthusiastic. A massive cave bear guards his kill and Hannah takes aim. Kurgo tells her to let it go as the cave bear stalks away. Hannah inspects the gun, finding that it had been loaded with blanks. In a fit, she yells at Jack, asking why he didn't just shoot him, and Jack says that Clough made his choice. Kurgo tells her that Jack's right, that a character like Clough could do them all in if he kept going the way he was. Jack follows the rules in the city. Out here, we follow his rules. And that's it for that. Woo! I love this series. The first 3 stories are pretty good in their purpose. The first one, Archipelago of Stone, sets up a location and inciting events for the series. Hannah from Wassoon coming to the city. It establishes some basic power dynamics, the governing council, the criminal poachers, the network of citizens loyal to Jack Tenrek, and his relationship to the council. The second story establishes the fact that Hannah is a clever and intelligent character with information the people from the city and the sea don't know. The third story begins to flesh out who Jack Tenrek is and how seriously he takes his role as an old blood mechanic, tasked with keeping the balance of life. I really like the short story format they have going on here. It feels like it builds the world out more than just having a straightforward story, one event after the other. The stories definitely have connective tissue overall, but as they're going, they just feel like side adventures, and it's pretty cool how natural that feels. Also, it reminds me a bit of the Flash Gordon comics from the 30s and 40s. It seems like the smart way to world build rather than to try and cram in all the relationships and places into one story and still try to make it flow. I must learn their secrets. The first chunk of stories are pretty straightforward in plot, keeping the balance and stuff with dinosaurs and creatures you've seen. Then there's a story called XENOZOIC, which basically is code for f***ed up shit's gonna happen. Like this guy! So before we get to the toys, I'm just going to show you some random art from the series. One of Jack's biggest enemies, literally and figuratively, is Wilhelmina Scharnhorst. God, I hate Scharnhorst, especially her name. A mole from the underground archives that eventually weasels her way into the governing council after another fat governor that doesn't like Jack is killed. What is it with Jack having so many fat enemies? Scharnhorst, fat governor I can't think of the name of, and Hammer Terhune. Like they're all super jealous of how ruggedly handsome and correct he is. Anyway, none of that has any inkling of happening in the first couple of short stories. Also, completely without mention for the first few issues, are the Grith, an ancient race of saurian-type people descended from the dinosaurs. I assume the first ones. They frequently call on Jack to help keep the balance, and surprising to Jack, they also reveal themselves to Hannah because she's good people. They can't talk or communicate, but they're bitchin' Scrabble players. Side note, I feel like the color choices from Epic Comics really takes away from the original inks in this series. God, there's so much great art in this. Here, Jack has been sabotaged in the wilds and is getting chased by an unrelenting cutter that has a broken jaw and sees him as its only food source. That's f***ing terrifying. I think Mark's drunk here. And let's hear it for Hannah. In a world overrun by dinosaurs, she's completely unafraid to rock a cave girl bikini. Or as my wife might call it, a cave girl bathing suit. Yep. I'm looking at you, Jurassic World Dominion. Bastosaurus. Hey, there's Mustafa Cairo. Cameo appearance by Luke Skywalker. Al Williamson influence. Mark Schultz definitely walks in the footsteps of some of the greats like Alex Raymond and Al Williamson. Hell, most of XENOZOIC world looks like these people live on the planet Mongo based on those building designs. When I'm reading, I also see similar atmospheric tricks utilized by the great Alex Raymond, father of Flash Gordon. And obviously some things that remind me of Al. All three of these guys have become some of my favorite all-time artists. The art also tends to make me think of the old Prince Valiant comics. But anyway, the comic just ends. I've been waiting for the story to continue next, according to Mark's Facebook page, for seemingly the last 7 years, maybe more. And I just found out that Topps Comics started doing their own Cadillacs and Dinosaurs comics in the 90s, taking place within the original stories. Look at those covers, they're bonkers and wonderful. Toys! They made action figures in 1993 to supplement the cartoon show. Of them, I have Jack, Hannah, and the car. I didn't have any of them at the time they were being made. I saw this guy's picture one day looking around the internet, and my mind was seized seeing that Cadillac. It hit me right in the nostalgia for simple 90s toys, and then I think it slowly dawned on me that they actually had a toy line. It took a while to hunt down the car for an acceptable price, but I found it new, sealed in the box. Credit to Go Figures. Link in the description below. Jack and Hannah each come with a ridiculously oversized actual firing cannon and 2 missiles, and I have to say the range on them is pretty good. Jack and Hannah each have the standard of the time. 5 points of articulation at the 2 swivel shoulders, the 2 swivel legs, and the head turn. Hey, how about these turntable shots? That's production quality. Boom! Cadillac! Heck yeah, I kept the box. Look! Other figures you can buy, including Hermes. I heard, though, that the same company did Dino Riders and just reused the same molds for the dinosaurs. That's disappointing. I love toy instruction booklets, so yes, I kept that too. The Cadillac has 2 lava cannons mounted to the front of the vehicle, which personally, if I was designing it, I would have turned them around and called them turbojets or something. Lava cannons strike me as completely impractical. Pressing on the air intake on the hood of the car releases 2 great projectiles from the front grille. When the trunk is open, a cleverly disguised second button hidden in the seats will release a less than adequate capture net. As you see, the trunk space on the vehicle isn't great, so you're not going to be storing the weapons in there, and having them ride up in the front seat with the heroes is dangerously irresponsible. They're the wrong scale, but I still try to use the Cadillac in regards to the new Jurassic Park figures that have come out, and I'm considering attempting a 3-inch custom Jack Tenrec figure from that series. And that's it for the toys, as Hannah gives us some shots to consider for this upcoming year's auto calendar. You're gorgeous, babe, I love you, I'll see you at the wrap party. Poor Hannah. She suffers from that classic misnomer of the action figure world where the creators thought that boys wouldn't be interested in a female figure. To an extent, I'm sure that's true, but for me personally, I always hated when the figures I got didn't look like the subject matter they were based on, especially the females. I'm actually considering getting another Hannah just so I can resculpt the hair and boobs and repaint her to look like the actual cartoon and comic. Games!
Back in the year 2020 AD, the Earth faced the devastation of the first great cataclysm.
Well, that was completely unexpected. In the cartoon, they say the 26th century. In the comic, there are some scientists monkeying around with some kind of archaeoplasm in 2030. If 2020 has a cataclysm, and 540 years later, it would be 2560, and yep, I don't know. The dates are all over the place depending on what version you're going with. The superstitious weirdo in me feels a little uncomfortable even talking about this in the same year we're living, though, especially with how the year has been turning out. Hopefully, we can bypass this whole thing like the cataclysm that was slated for 1994 in Thundar the Barbarian.
The year 1994. From out of space comes a runaway planet, hurtling between the Earth and the Moon, unleashing cosmic destruction.
It's better to be on the end of a cataclysm rather than the beginning, in my humble opinion. There was an arcade beat-em-up made by Capcom that in my limited experience is the best. Mostly because I haven't played any of the others, but it really is a pretty cool game. There was also a Sega CD one and one on the PC, which I'm not sure whether it's just the same game or not. I believe the whole thing was a driving and shooting experience. I didn't delve too deeply into it. I'd rather get deeper into the cartoon, to be honest. But there was a pretty cool intro that broke down the story very well and added some new artwork. Whew, let's wrap this puppy up. Yes, sir! What can I take away from all this to apply to my own story, Smacked in the Head, the animated series? Because I'm working on my comic all by my lonesome, I need to find some ways to make the process faster and less painful on myself. Either that or hire a crew. As such, like I mentioned, I appreciate the short story mentality of this series, and how it has connective tissue throughout, but takes time to tell a unique story each time out. I'd really like to figure out how to break down that more and use it to expand the universe that my stories take place in. Whew! That's a pretty good review, right? How many other comic reviewers on YouTube are gonna make the effort to talk about the 3 stories, the games, the toys, and the cartoon show? That's right. I think in light of this experience, it's only fair that you like, share, subscribe, and tell a friend. That's it for me. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Quahoon.